This is the Dell XPS M1530, a high-end consumer laptop from 2008. I looked on the Internet Archive to see if I could find any pricing information for this machine, and a similar one with a better hard drive and an inferior Wi-Fi card would have retailed for about $2,100 in 2008. A quick trip to the inflation calculator, that's over $3,000 in today's money. 13 years later, in 2020, I bought this thing for a grand total of $27. This laptop was kind of the mid-range-ish thing, if you will, of Dell's lineup, better than the Inspirons of the day, but not quite nearly as good as the XPS gaming line of laptops that they also offered at the same time. There was also a 13-inch version of this exact same laptop. For that money, it of course came with pretty good hardware, including an Intel Core 2 Duo CPU and the then new Windows Vista. For features in the laptop, on the front we have some status indicators for power, hard drive, and battery status, dual headphone jacks, a microphone jack, and an SD card reader with the blank in it still. On the left side of the laptop we have a Dell logo, the power socket, two USB 2.0 ports, a VGA port without the screws, which is annoying, a gigabit Ethernet port, HDMI, which would have been pretty nice for the time, a mini FireWire port, and the slot for the hard drive. On the right side of the laptop we have an express card slot with the blank still in it, a wireless switch, wireless catcher button, a slimline 8X DVD drive, another USB 2.0 port, TV out port, and a Kensington lock slot, and another Dell logo. On the back of the laptop we have the battery and the cooling vent. On the palm rest of the laptop we have the aforementioned stickers, which are starting to peel on this machine, and I should probably just take them off. We also have a fingerprint reader, which would have been pretty nice for the time, the fairly decent keyboard, and the fairly mediocre trackpad. It's just not very big, and it just is really sensitive, to be honest. Something to note is that the buttons on this one are a bit screwed up. The right-click button is fine, but the left button is pretty squishy and really doesn't require a lot of force to move. It's just very worn out. The palm rest of the laptop is a brushed metal piece that's glued onto a piece of plastic. As you can see in the right corner, it's a bit dented, and on the left side of the laptop, the palm rest is actually being taped in place because the glue used to hold it to the plastic is starting to unstick. It also has touch volume controls, media controls, and the eject button for the optical drive. It also has the power button, annoyingly with an LED that only stays on for a few seconds, status indicators for the caps lock, num lock, and scroll lock, as well as Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and the Dell Media Direct button. You can press this button to load in Dell's Media Center competitor on startup. It also has two fairly mediocre speakers right above it. On the screen of the laptop we have the webcam, as well as the stereo microphone setup, which actually isn't too bad on this computer. And finally, we have a very glossy 15.4-inch 1440 by 900 display. It's actually a fairly decent screen, although this one is a bit dim. On the lid of the laptop we have the Dell XPS logo. This one has seen some scratches, but otherwise it's still in fairly good condition. And yes, if you're wondering, the Forza sticker does add extra performance. On the bottom of the laptop we have some removable covers, as well as the spot for the hard drive, and the battery, which is actually still original to this machine, even if it's the smaller option, and it does still work. However, this machine does have a bit of an interesting issue with its battery that we'll get to later. Also, under the battery slot is a SIM card slot. This thing can actually do mobile broadband, although this one's not equipped with that. Under the bigger cover reveals the Intel Core 2 Duo T8300 CPU at 2.4 GHz, the NVIDIA GeForce 8600M GT graphics card, and the 965 mobile Intel chipset. It's all being cooled by this admittingly pretty small cooler. That's one of the issues with this computer: heat. It also has 4 GB of DDR2 667 MHz RAM. Underneath the second cover, which I actually didn't get with this machine when I got it, is the Intel Wireless 4965 AGN Wi-Fi card. This PC also has a Dell Bluetooth module. For hard drive, this machine has a 500 GB WD Black. It obviously didn't come with this drive that was made 10 years after this computer. When this machine was new, it originally had a 250 GB 5400 RPM hard drive. When I got it, I put a 320 GB drive that I stole for another computer and put a 500 GB drive in, which then died, and put a 100 GB drive in, which was too small, and then ended up on a 500 GB WD Black. I thought about putting an SSD in this machine, however, honestly, as you'll soon see by the operating system choice, I just didn't really think it was that necessary for this machine, so I decided to put a decent hard drive in it instead for the time being. The only problem is it's a slim drive, much newer than this machine, so it's a bit tough to get into this computer. It'd be even easier if I had the hard drive caddy piece that would have gone into this machine, but I didn't get it, and it's pretty expensive right now for some reason. This machine also has a Windows Vista Home Premium COA on it, which is the version of Windows this would have shipped with, and that's what it's running if you saw the recovery video I did on this computer. Speaking of which, I think it's time to go ahead and fire this machine up. Thanks to this thing's HDMI port, I can actually use this thing on my capture card, which is really good because this screen is incredibly glossy. There is a fun quirk with the HDMI port on this machine, which is that it's underscaled. This is an NVIDIA thing, it's not something to do with this computer particularly, but it is something to note with this machine. Fortunately, that's why we have editing. This machine is running BIOS version A12 from 2008, which is what it had when I got it. We can see the processor information, the memory information, and the other device information, which if you're paying attention, you might notice under AC adapter type, it says unknown device installed. That's the problem with this computer. It doesn't seem to be able to detect any charger I plug into it. Therefore, it refuses to charge the battery. Like I said, the battery still does hold a charge, however, the computer simply refuses to charge it. This isn't a problem with my adapters. I've tried many different ones on many different computers and it's worked fine. It's just entirely something with this computer, unfortunately. The BIOS allows you to enable or disable the Ethernet port, USB ports, media card and 1394 ports, change the SATA operation, enable the module bay device, and the flash cache module, which isn't a thing on this one. The video tab allows you to change the brightness. We can set passwords for the admin, system, and hard drive password, change it or bypass the password, wireless switch change, Wi-Fi catcher change, CPU XD support, and CompuTrace, which thankfully is turned off on this one. We can turn on or off multi-core support, dynamic acceleration, HDD acoustic mode, which doesn't seem to do anything on this one, and speed step. We can toggle USB wake support, change the adapter warnings, which I actually left enabled for this demo. You'll see why it kind of quickly gets annoying. Function key emulation, fast boot, which is set to minimal on this one. However, if you turn this computer off too fast, it has to do a full memory check and takes forever to boot. Virtualization, which I've turned on, keypad settings, the num block LED, USB emulation, the Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and cellular options, as well as options for the wireless switch and the Wi-Fi catcher. Now, as you can see, every time the system boots up, this message comes up asking you to connect the proper AC adapter. This is why I've turned these messages off, because it does this every time the computer's booted up. Not a whole lot I can do. My guess is there's probably an issue either to do with the DC jack or the actual motherboard itself. One other thing is that in the boot menu, we get some diagnostics that are included with this machine as well. This is a typical Dell thing, but here you go. This is too old to have the newer UEFI-based pre-boot environment, but here it is anyway, it works. Now, this computer for the longest time was running Windows 7 Home Premium. However, as of recently, I've decided to go ahead and put Windows Vista Home Premium back onto it from its original image. I did an entire video on this. If you haven't already seen it, I'll link it down below, I guess. I thought about installing Windows XP on this computer. However, it's actually a bit too new to properly work with it, therefore not all the drivers are compatible, so let's stick with Vista, I guess. So let's take a look at the software on this machine. I won't spend a whole lot of time on the programs that came with this computer since I already covered them in that video, but we'll quickly glance over them anyway. This computer has Adobe Photoshop Elements 6, as well as Premiere Elements 4 and Adobe Reader 8. Creative Media Source Go, Image Burn, the Media Direct software, which we can go ahead and open up. Like I said earlier, this is Dell's competitor-ish to Media Center. It allows you to do the same kind of stuff, allowing you to view pictures, listen to music, view videos, and if you had one, be able to watch a DVD. It's honestly fairly decent software for its time. It also has an old version of Firefox, however I've replaced it with Supermium for modern web browsing. It also has an old copy of Windows Live Essentials 2011, so we can do Photo Gallery and Movie Maker. Who needs Photoshop and Premiere when you've got this software? It also has 7-zip, a bunch of Dell software that I already covered, the fingerprint reader software, an old copy of Microsoft Encarta that I decided to throw on this machine. It's era appropriate. This software is absolutely a blast from the past. I didn't even know they still made it by the time this computer would have been new, but there was a 2007 version, so I figured why not? I guess this is a Vista computer. It also has Microsoft Office Enterprise 2007. It originally had a home and student version, but I didn't have a key for that, and I had the old Enterprise disk, so I just decided to go ahead and throw that on here instead. It also has Qbit torrent for some reason. An old version of QuickTime. I forgot to mention this has iTunes on it as well. Specifically QuickTime version 7.6 and iTunes version 9. It also has Roxio Creator, which is still expired. A very old version of KidPix that I threw on this primarily for fun.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. KidPix, come on and play with KidPix. Change it up, draw it up, move it up. There it is, move around, add the sound. KidPix, come on and play with
This software is definitely a blast from the past. It also wasn't made for a screen this high resolution. There's just a black border around the window. Trend Micro Internet Security that I honestly forgot to uninstall. An old version of VMware Workstation from 2011, specifically Workstation 8. I messed around with some virtual machines on this computer. This is why I left virtualization enabled on this machine. Not that any of these really need it. At the moment, I have Windows 2000 Professional on here, Windows XP Professional, Kubuntu 6.06 from 2006, and Kubuntu 10.04 LTS from 2010. I gotta say, this thing does VMs pretty well, to be honest, especially with this old version of Workstation. I might experiment with it some more, given this thing has such a large hard drive. And the Windows Live software. Now you might have noticed there are some games installed on this machine as well. I figured I'd go ahead and try some of my XP era games on this thing just because it has the NVIDIA GPU. Not a ton of stuff, but a few games.
EA Games. Challenge everything.
Starting things off with Need for Speed Underground 2 from 2004. This is one of my favorite older PC games since I'm just naturally into racing games for some reason. I may not have any skills, but I do have a computer that runs it pretty well, at 1024 by 768 with about medium detail. This machine also has another classic from 2004, Flatout. Hey look, it's like this computer was meant to play this game. Just like the last game, I still have no skills, but again, this computer runs this game pretty well, to be honest. I also have its sequel, Flatout 2, from 2006. Just like the original, this game runs pretty well on this computer, to be honest. This game, even to this day, is still an incredibly fun game, so we better move on before I get too sucked into this on this computer. I also installed Halo Combat Evolved on this computer, which is why it has GameSpy Arcade on it. This game was way before this computer's time, coming out in 2003. But that means, just like those other games, this computer runs this game pretty well.
Not that you listen, but I'd suggest letting my subroutines handle the final approach.
Excellent work. Thank you.
Again, just like the other games, I have no skills, but that doesn't mean I can't try anyway. It also has SimCity 4 Deluxe from 2003. However, when I tried launching this game on this computer, it just doesn't do anything. This is the most this program will do. I'm not sure if maybe it's a Vista thing perhaps, or maybe even this install of Windows thing, maybe? This copy of this game normally works on Windows XP, so I'm just not really entirely sure, but this also happens on Need for Speed Underground, even with a no CD patch, so I'm not sure, maybe it's just an EA thing. Finally, I did have to try out one more classic from the time. This game did struggle a little more on this computer. The frame rate occasionally dipped. I couldn't actually find a program that worked properly to view the frame rate, but...
Hey, Big Smoke! It's me, Carl! Chill! CJ?
So yeah, that's a brief look at a few games running on this computer. This is a seriously pretty capable machine for its time, even if it wasn't advertised as a gaming machine. No, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This joke is getting old anyway. I did install a few old PopCap games, not just Peggle. Also an old version of Bejeweled from 2009. And Zuma's Revenge, also from 2009. These games make this computer work the hardest out of all of them, but that makes sense because they're the newest, even if they are PopCap games. As far as control panel settings go, we have the wireless card settings, the fingerprint reader settings, NVIDIA control panel, and the Sigma-Tel audio. By the way, if you're curious, that fingerprint reader, while it is nice for the time, doesn't really work very well on this computer. Finally, here's the system properties. This is the OEM install. This machine originally shipped with RTM, however, I updated it to Service Pack 2, and you might notice one other thing. This is a 32-bit OS. This is rather unfortunate. This thing did not come with a 64-bit OS. That's just not what Dell did at the time. So it's limited to 4 gigs of RAM anyway. Here's the Windows Experience Index if you really care. So yeah, that's a comprehensive look at the software load on this machine and demonstrating it running some different things. It's got a very good load of software as is. I'm definitely pretty glad I picked this machine up all those years ago, especially considering that these days, these are actually starting to get kind of expensive on the secondhand market. So I'm definitely trying to do my best to try and keep this thing working as long as possible, since these were known for overheating. Which is a bit of a shame, because this is a fairly capable laptop for its time that can do a whole lot of what I've tried to run on it. And hell, even though it's a Core 2 Duo, this computer still can be used even to this day. Even if it is fairly slow, thanks to the use of Supermium on Windows Vista, this thing still has a modern enough web browser. Though, again, this is an unsupported OS, so I don't know how much I would recommend that, but it's a thing. Here's a final look at the specs of this machine, again including the 32-bit OS, the Penryn CPU, the NVIDIA card with 256 megabytes of dedicated RAM, the Western Digital hard drive, the DVD drive which is made by OptiArc, and the Sigma-Tel audio. Overall, it's a fairly decent machine for its time. I'll have to see if I end up fixing the battery issue this thing has, since that's the one problem it has, and I'm just not really sure if it's worth it, since while it claims to throttle performance, I haven't noticed an issue with it, so I'm just not really sure if it's worth it on this computer.